Recording started.
Welcome, everybody, to this week's Matrexit discussion group call for tactical sovereignty. Got a few members on the line here with us tonight. We've just been kind of chit-chatting, and that's why we started the recording 7 or 8 minutes late, I think, here probably. But that's just fine. It's kind of discussing just prior to starting the recording why tactical sovereignty was started. And I don't think I probably really mentioned this near enough. And the reason why it started up originally, well, let me digress even back a little further. This is at the advent of all of the new different phones coming out, and going from those flip phones, to, and really what was the craze would be like the smallest phone possible. That was a craze for a while. And I had like an Ericsson, little tiny Ericsson phone. It was like the size of a pager, and I really liked that phone actually. And then matured on to other phones. All of a sudden, now bigger phones started becoming the popular thing, which they probably will be from here on out, I would say, until other technologies come along. And the girlfriend at the time I had said, Brian, you need to get this specific kind of phone that I've got. She said, this phone is like having a computer in your hand. And I said, no, thank you. Don't want a computer. Don't want anything close to a computer for multiple reasons. And one of those reasons would be because, I would see people at work in the morning and they'd be complaining because they were up all night because they started playing a game online, finding something to occupy their mind other than letting the mind do its own job. And next thing they would know, it would be 5, 6 o'clock in the morning. That was one good reason for not wanting one. But I also told her, I said, listen, if I get a computer, I'll let you know right now that a lot of things in my life are going to change. A lot of things about the way I live is going to change. Which kind of confused her. But there's just too much out there that we don't know. And the more you learn, the more you study, the more you research, the more you find out how little you really do know. And you start discovering all these other huge areas of life that you weren't educated about. Either because your educators didn't know them or because the system itself just didn't feel that it was advantageous to the system for you to know those things. Wanted you to remain in more of a malleable state, controllable state. Just wanted you to be a good worker. That's, I think, what Rockefeller said. That's all they needed. Didn't need any more scientists, doctors, artists. Had plenty of those. We just needed a good worker. And if you look at the school system today, that's pretty much all it is set up for, at best. It's barely even that anymore. And, so since I was very firm and put my foot down about not getting a phone like that, I remember when I got that phone. And yeah, things changed. And I saw in there when I was researching different items that I could save them to like a notepad, didn't know what that was, or I could even save them to a group like on Facebook. And I thought, oh, what's that? And I absolutely did not want to get on Facebook. I refused to get on Facebook, didn't want anything to do with social media. So after the girlfriend set up my Facebook account for me, I quickly saw how you could start a group. So I started a private group. In fact, no, it wasn't even private. It was a secret group. And I was using that to store all of my info at. Things I was researching, if I didn't have time to read, maybe something was a huge PDF, I would just store it to that group. Or different articles, I just store it in that group. And go back, look at it when I had time to research it later. And over the years, I have had some people come out and say, oh, Brian's promoting this or pushing that. And it's like, why? Because it's posted in the group. That doesn't mean I'm promoting it or pushing it. Now, today, there's some things that aren't allowed necessarily in the group because I found out, how ridiculous they are. And after probably a month or two, the the girlfriend, was going and showing other people this group, friends of hers and stuff. And there's people saying, hey, why don't you open this group up more, make it public? So I looked into that, and I saw that when it's public, people can pretty much post anything they want into there, which wouldn't necessarily be good. But there was a setting for it to be a closed or private group. So I changed it to a private group. And within 4, 5, 6 months, noticed that all of a sudden there was 2, 3, 4,000 members in there. So there was a lot of people interested in the same thing I was researching. And so that's what it was really started for, just a way for people to follow the journey that I was on and what I was looking at, because initially, the very first thing I wanted to find was the connection between us and the state. I was not, and still am not, a firm believer that just because you're born on the soil here, that means that you are subject to the dictates of the state. And if you look at, for instance, like naturalization processes, things like that for different countries, you're going to see, everybody has their own viewpoint on it. And so, no, it's not just natural that since you're born on a particular soil that you're subject to that soil. I think the U.S. has probably the most furthest reaching aspect of that than any other country, because the U.S. will go so far as to say, well, even if you're in the waters of another country, but you're born on a vessel that, say, is flagged to the United States, then that's going to make you a U.S. citizen. Or, you could be on a U.S. plane that's flying over whatever country, doesn't matter. You are a U.S. citizen. And a lot of other countries don't have laws like that in their citizenship or naturalization processes. A lot of them say, hey, yeah, if you are in the waters of, say, Chile, then you're a Chilean. Things to that extent. So, I mean, they vary from country to country. So it's not natural law. It's man-made law, or better termed, really, color of law, quasi-law. All right, where was I at? Yeah, that was the main reasons really for starting Tactical Sovereignty, is just people to follow along on my journey, basically, so I had a place to stash stuff at. And the original group has a huge file section. The original group was opened up here a week or two ago for about a week for new people to jump in there. Because even while it's archived, if you remember, you can still go in there, use the file section, you can use the search engine on the group to find different articles and topics that you're looking for. So it's been a very, very useful tool that way. And like I say, the things that are posted in there are not things that are being necessarily promoted. They just might have some value worth looking at. And I didn't have a topic really for this evening, but probably about 30 seconds before I started the recording, I remembered something that occurred 4 or 5 days ago, and I think I'm going to discuss this evening. And I came across an acquaintance of mine who, he was like, "Oh, Brian, how you doing?" He said, "Good seeing you." He said, so he said, "Tell me something that I don't know. Tell me something that you've discovered. Tell me something that will surprise me." Is really what he said. Well, tell me something that will surprise me. And that's something I had never really thought about before, because I think a lot of times when we're learning new knowledge or new information, new ideas come across our path, it's like you want to run out and tell everybody, which really isn't that smart to do, because it's way outside the perimeters of their mind and the rules that they've been subject to live their life, and without even really stopping to realize that that has occurred. And many times as well, some of these topics, we might find things that we think are amazing or crazy or whatever. And the more and more you dig into it and research it, and the more you comprehend what that topic is really all about, you might find that that topic is actually bullcrap, or what I call guru guano. You know, so and sometimes it's good not to just come out with things that we first find out, but it's also good to have some things I think stashed in our mind that, if you want to start a good conversation with people or kind of perk their ears, have something that will be maybe a little bit shocking to them that they had never really considered. And so what I said to him when he asked me that question, he said, tell me something that'll surprise me. I said, okay, I'll tell you a couple things. I said, number one, you don't own anything. You don't own your car. If you think you own your house, you don't own that. You don't even own your offspring. And right there kind of set him back on his heels. But that's true for multiple reasons. And one of the things that goes hand in hand with that as well, that I brought up, was not only do you not own anything, but I said, you've never paid for anything in your life. You've never paid a bill. You've never paid a mortgage payment. You never once have probably ever paid anything. And that's one of the things that's just constant in everybody's head that you're thinking about, probably daily is, oh man, I got to make enough money because I got to pay rent, or I got to pay the mortgage, or I've got, say, maybe car insurance coming up I've got to pay off, or a car payment I got to pay off. Well, technically, no, you've never paid for anything. I would recommend to people, and not everybody gets this opportunity in life, but if you ever end up in a situation where you can just chat with a judge, specifically really a bankruptcy judge, you can bring that up to them, bring up that question to them about payment, and they'll tell you the same thing. You've never paid for anything. There's only discharge and set off, and there's very little difference between those two. So everything is discharge and set off. And I find it interesting to see a lot of different groups that are out, trying to figure out how you discharge this or set off that, um, how do I discharge my student loan? Well, it pretty much says, plain and simple, the way you discharge it is through Federal Reserve notes or United States dollar. Or you will actually, if you want to pay something, pay something, that would be set up in the terms of a contract. You can pay for things, for instance, with labor or in barter and trade. Those are methods of payment. A very, very tried and true payment plan is listed in the Constitution, which refers to gold and silver. Those are forms of payment because you're actually using something of substance. You're using something of real value in return for something else of real value. And this is one of the reasons why you'll notice, say, for instance, if there's a bankruptcy or somebody's insolvent, things like that, that what the courts will do is they'll start breaking up property amongst so-called creditors. The same thing occurs even in the situation for a divorce. A divorce judge will start breaking up property according to what he equitably believes is right and proper, which of course is going to vary from judge to judge. And a lot of that has even been codified and put in statutes. And so he's going to be hamstrung there a little bit as far as to who gets what percentage of what. Most states have laid that out already. But this all comes down to that main situation that I brought up, and that is that you've never paid for anything. If you've truly paid for something, it's truly yours, and it's not somebody else's to make any decisions over. If it's been gained through the US dollar, the USD, or the Federal Reserve note, the FRN, then that is somebody else's property. And so the people that have jurisdiction over that property get to decide what happens to the property you received in exchange for the Federal Reserve note or USD. something I think that's very interesting that has been going on for a while now, for a few months, is a lot of people, look at cryptocurrency, for instance, and they think that's a protection. It's blockchain. It's out of jurisdiction, and they're pretty much true. It has been for quite a while. And I've read court cases even where there was things being bought or sold with cryptocurrency, and judges flat out said, they didn't think they really even had jurisdiction to make any decision over those properties, because there was no jurisdiction over the United States or over cryptocurrency, which there would be with the United States dollar or the Federal Reserve note. And so those issues were kind of hands off for them when it came to cryptocurrency. But the Uniform Commercial Code, UCC, is working right now on coming out with Chapter 12 or Title 12, however they have it listed in the Uniform Commercial Code, that is going to be addressing cryptocurrencies and blockchain. Things like Bitcoin, Ethereum. And so they're going to be reining those in and putting those under jurisdiction of the U.S. Judicial system as well. So that period of freedom that's been enjoyed for several years regarding cryptocurrency is probably going to be coming to some form of an end by the end of the year, 2022. However, there is still a lot of details with it that won't be worked out quite yet. And so things will slowly tighten down more and more with cryptocurrency and blockchain over the next several years. So that's kind of something to keep an eye out for and keep your mind thinking about. Well, one of the things a lot of people don't realize is, as far as what's known, there's probably 40 to 60 different alternative currencies being used in the United States of America right now. A lot of these are like in the Northeast, and there's a few in the South, and then a few more scattered out towards like the Pacific Northwest. And a lot of these are essentially kind of like a coupon system, and they're all based within a community. And people traveling through the communities, or even stopping in one of the towns, maybe to have lunch or something, would never know that something like that really exists in those communities. But there are communities that have set up their own currencies so that there would be more freedom for them as far as to how it's used, and freedom over property that is purchased with those items. So that's something people need to think about. People should consider, even among friends, because I think we should be at a point where people are claiming, oh, the system's going to come down, the Treasury is going to do this, we're going to do that, the whole system's going to collapse. And we should really be in a position where it doesn't matter to us whether the system is going to collapse. We're doing our own thing, and that's part of what being in the private is all about as well. And I mean, there's a few concepts that we need to comprehend, and being in the private is one of them that I think a lot of people don't really have their heads really wrapped around. They might think they do, but they don't. When you stop and think about private, what is the opposite of private? The opposite of private would obviously be public, right? But most people don't really comprehend even what the public is all about, and that's probably the biggest problem there. And that is that the public takes on two kind of genres. One, you've got the general public, which is just Joe Sixpack walking down the street, and then there is the public, which the public are your elected officials, if you want to look at them that way, or people that serve in county or state or federal government capacities. That is the true public. For instance, when you read the Constitution and it says, "We the people," who are they talking about? They're talking about the public. They're talking about the officials of U.S. Inc. or of Mississippi or of Alaska or California, people that work for the state or the federal government. That is the public. And so, guess what? Not all public information is public, is it? That would be one aspect to look at. For instance, even look at your public park. I've brought that up a couple times. Look at your public park. If it belongs to just everybody in common, everybody in general, then how come somebody was allowed to set rules for that park, or even rules as to when it's open or when it's closed? Uh, Guess what? If you think the public is just everybody in general, then evidently that public park is only public from 8 a.m. till 8 p.m. And the rest of the time it's in somebody else's hands, if that makes any sense to you. Stop and think about those things. Because so many of these things are right in our face and they're obvious, but you don't see it. And it's just things that we've kind of presumed all our life, or growing up being taught one way without ever stopping to say why. One of the worst things I believe that I ever heard growing up are statements like, well, that's just the way it is, or that's just the way it's done, or this is just how everybody does it. Well, I'm sorry, but looking at the way things are today and the direction things have been heading in over even the past 100 years, um, just the way it's done, or the way everybody does it, evidently hasn't been the best solution. Otherwise, we wouldn't find ourselves in some of the situations that we find ourselves in today. It's time to start kind of re-examining these things, thinking outside the box, and looking at them with a different eye. The first thing I mentioned that I brought up to my friend when he said, tell me something that will surprise me, I mentioned was that you don't own anything. And the main reason why, and we're starting to uncover more and more information as time goes on about it when it comes to the offspring or the man or woman. But, and it does relate to how this is done with, say, vehicles or homes. And that is that it's done through split title. And it's done through split title because, well, actually, because it's done through a trust. Everything is a trust format. And split title is at its core the essence of what a trust is. I've said this before, and a lot of people kick against it, but that only tells me they have not studied trust or trust law. But the essence of trust law is to separate ownership from the true party of interest and to bring in a third party. With trust, that's most commonly seen if people has a family trust or work with any of those. That's most commonly seen, for instance, with the office of trustee. What do the trustees do? If the beneficiary wants something that is above and beyond, say, the monthly stipend for the trust that they allotted, then what they will do is they'll go to the trustee and say, hey, trustee, and try to give them a good reason why, they need to buy a new car or make, a huge additional expense that would be deducted from the trust. And the trustee then decides whether or not it is something that will be beneficial or not to the trust. Because the trustee, when it comes down to it, he's really supposed to make sure that if he were to ever leave that position as trustee, that he leaves that trust in as good or better shape than it was in when he first became trustee. So a good trustee, rather than say, for instance, I'll give you an example. Somebody wants to get money to buy a house and they want to dip into some of the trust funds or trust assets, better terminology. They want to dip into the trust assets in order to finance that endeavor. A good trustee may say, well, hold on. You want $250,000 for this home. Well, what is this home going to do for the trust? the trustee is going to say, okay, is this in a place that is growing?
You got
Is
rates
the
too.
is the value of that house going to go up, or is it going to go down? That's something to pay attention to, because that's going to have a perfect explanation as to whether or not it'll benefit the trust or not. Trustee might say, hey, you know what? Instead of putting $250,000 towards this house, why don't you go and take that $250,000, put it towards this business endeavor here that the trust already owns, strengthen this endeavor so it makes a better profit for the trust, and then turn around and take some of those profits, and we'll use those profits towards buying you another house. That's a way of looking at, a basic transaction for a trust that will benefit it, because that's what trustee is supposed to do. And that essentially is the concept that was used with homeownership, with the deed, or with cars, ownership of cars, as far as like the titling goes. You are given, for instance, with your vehicle, you're given a certificate of title, which should be a clue that there is another title that exists when you receive just a certificate of title. But what you're receiving is a legal title. And the legal title permits you to do all the legal things with that vehicle. Purchase and disposal, those are legal activities. Insuring, registering, getting a paint job done on it, getting a new engine put in it, anything like that, any legal formalities that have to be done with the vehicle, you have the legal right to do it because you are holding legal title. But there's also the equitable title, which would be your manufacturer's statement of origin or a manufacturer's certificate of origin, and that is turned over to the state upon the time of the original purchase of the vehicle. And the equitable title holder basically just reaps the benefits from whatever that vehicle brings in. Say, for instance, benefit of receiving profits through, say, registration or insurance or taxes when it's bought or sold, tickets that a driver may incur with the use of the vehicle, or any other citations that that vehicle might incur. Those reap benefits for the equitable holder. And so that's a good example right there with your vehicle. With the homeownership, it's the same exact way. I see a lot of people talk about different ways, for instance, of getting property from the commercial rolls, so that you're not really paying property tax, because property taxes are specifically supposed to be for commercial properties, but they wiggle regular private homes in the same way. And so a lot of people found a lot of different ways of doing that. This has been discovered specifically, I know, for the state of Florida, where you can find that exact information that does that and take it to the tax assessor, and the tax assessor will drop the home off from the property rolls. But that's one of the reasons why they keep property taxes fairly small, percentage wise, because if they were too astronomical and too tough, then they'd really get a huge outcry from people, which wouldn't surprise me if this doesn't start to happen in the next several years, because it doesn't really matter what state you're on. It looks like tax assessors are going and finding any little excuse or reason that they can for raising property taxes on people's homes. I've talked to people in numerous states, and they are going up everywhere. The state is trying to suck in money right now, and that's one of the ways they're doing it. And I think they're kind of forgetting that the original reason why they kept those taxes, somewhat lower, would be so there wouldn't be an outcry from the people. But I think they've come to a point now where they frankly really do not care. Not that they've ever really cared before, but they're really being blatant about it now. So there's probably some other bigger plans they have on the horizon, and I just recommend people be prepared for anything possible that can come along, because truly anything possible can come along. If I had been told 4 or 5 years ago that people would behave and do some of the things that they've done the last 2 years, um, 2020, 2021, and in 2022, I would have laughed. I would absolutely laughed. I would have called you a liar if you had told me that people, everybody, would be walking around with a diaper on their face. I would have laughed. I said, no, people are smarter than that. And they'll do their own research. It's not hard to find the real research. No, everybody did. Everybody complied. Very willing. Um, Voluntary servitude is alive and strong. And that's the beast that really has to be pushed against. I said I really don't have any plans for this evening's conversation. Let me take a peek at the chat, see if any questions were in there. Nope. Okay. Just stuff from our previous conversation, because we were talking about different things dealing with what you should consume and what you should not consume. But I know powers that be don't like you really discussing those things. So that's why we kind of started the recording a little bit late this evening. So those are just a couple topics there. I think that anybody that's new to, really discovering what freedom is and what freedom isn't, and thinking that you have total freedom with where you're at, you might want to explore. You might want to research them. Researching ownership, what ownership really is, how it pertains to your offspring, how it pertains to a vehicle, to a home, and research money as well. Research why you have never officially ever paid for anything. Here in the past year or so, they've made Modern Money Mechanics, that's printed by the Federal Reserve Bank out of Chicago. They've made that available again. For a long time, that book was not available to people, but they've made it available to people again. And I recommend reading it. Go online, easy to find. You can find a PDF or purchase a copy. I got both of them, and sit and read it. And you can easily sit down within like an hour, hour and a half and read it. But for the education system that people have been afforded nowadays, I would recommend that you really need to sit and go through the details of it. Maybe even have a dictionary with you. Doesn't matter what dictionary. Use a Merriam-Webster 1828. That's what I generally recommend to people. And look at some of the terms in there that you've not seen before, and really sit and think about some of the concepts that they're explaining, because to like an average banker, they would know automatically exactly what the book is talking about. But there's different things in there that they are telling people and exposing to people that the average Joe just wouldn't know. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just
Hey,
that
bro.
it's not something that's part of their genre. Hey, what's going on, Joe? Speaking of Joe, what's going on, Joe?
I can't help it. I'm just one of those average Joes. Anyways, what did you call that book? What's the title of it?
Modern Money Mechanics.
All right, continue. Thank you.
Yeah. For instance, if somebody wants like an example of a statement in there, and I'm going to put it in layman's terms because the way they say it is just kind of a one-off. You wouldn't quite grab it right away. There's a statement in there that lets you know that the number one liability to the Treasury is the Federal Reserve note. That's a liability to them because that is funds that they're obligated to provide. That's an example of debt, actually. And if you look, for instance, this kind of changed the way maybe you look at money, but every dollar that is in circulation, And when I say in circulation, I'm talking about the money that's in people's pockets or, in your wife's purse. The things that's right in your hand. The money that's in circulation, every dollar of it exists because of a debt that somebody has. That's what put that money into existence, was loans and debts. Because it's against the law for banks to loan out lenders money. A lot of people think that that's what happens. That's not what happens. They go to the Treasury with a promissory note, and the funds come from the Treasury, and poof, new money exists into circulation. That's the reason, if people aren't too young to remember here, that's one of the reasons why the economy was doing so well under the Clinton administration, was because the Clinton administration really pushed for everybody to own a home. It was his version, I think, of Roosevelt's chicken in every pot. Everybody should own their own home. And tons of people were going out and able to purchase homes that they couldn't afford through declared income. They didn't have to go in with check stubs showing how much money they made. No, they were allowed just to go into the lender, even though they say worked at Tuffy's Tires or 7-Eleven or whatever. They could walk in and claim they made $250,000 a year, and Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac were urged to go ahead and accept declared income as proof of income, which they did. And so what people do, even though they knew they can't maybe afford a $2,000 a month mortgage, this is back in the late 90s. Well, what would happen is that, because I remember the same time, 2008, 2009, values of homes were starting to really increase. And that was something that really pushed people to go out and buy a home, because they knew that the value would go up on it. So the people that, for instance, couldn't afford at that time, 2008, 2009, a $2,000 loan monthly on their home, they were doing it anyway. They get approved for a $250,000 house. What are they doing? They're out looking for a $250,000 house, without really putting two and two together. And of course, that would just make sense that it would end up in a disaster, and it did end up in a disaster. But that's what did so good even at that time, and was kind of bolstering the economy a little bit then in late 2008, 2009, was all of these sales of homes. Same way as it did, like I said, under the Clinton administration. It was pumping fresh money into the economy. And there's differing schools of thought, but a lot of people during those heydays rather, of the economy, was looking at all this new money coming in as being a positive thing to the system, when technically it's not necessarily a positive thing, because it's a supply and demand issue. And if there's a whole bunch of money circulating out there in the system, then that loaf of bread is going to go up in price. Whereas when there is less money out there in the system, that loaf of bread will stay lower, just to keep it in very simplistic terms. So, yeah, the way money gets into the system is through debt. And every dollar in your pocket is symbolizing a debt that someone owes to the banks, or that maybe even the country might owe to the banks. But there's some topics people can look into and start researching, and because there's a lot of these little, I don't really want to call them rabbit holes, because they're not fallacies. They're actual truths of life that people don't explore. And the main reason why a lot of people, I think, don't explore these is because, first off, they really don't know how to. I was in a conversation this week with 4 or 5 gentlemen, and it was just, talking about the weather, stupid nonsense conversation. And one of them brought up something regarding something that surprised them. And that was, running into somebody that they knew and dealing with them on an issue, and come to find out this friend of theirs didn't really read very good. And I made a comment to him that actually 51% of Americans are functioning illiterate. That's a fact that kind of sets you back on your butt a little bit. And of course, the other 3, 4 gentlemen in the group automatically want to disagree with it. What are you talking about? There's no way it's 51%. I could see it maybe being 15% or 10%, but there's no way that 51% of the American people are illiterate. And a couple of them got on their phone and started bringing up stats like what state is the worst for illiteracy. And one of the other gentlemen brought up some southern states. I was like, whoa, 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 stop. I said, you're categorizing people there doing that, And I said, that might not necessarily be the case. Oh, no, it's definitely going to be a southern state. I'm like, okay, whatever. And one gentleman, I think he brought up that on whatever site he was looking at, because it kind of depends on who you're looking at, probably, right? He brought up that uh, actually the state of California was the highest for illiteracy. And they all kind of continued talking about it and kind of arguing back and forth on it, but basically saying, see, if the state of California is only, say, for instance, around 16%, then there's no way that the whole country is 51%, especially if California is supposed to be the highest. And there was one gentleman out of the whole group that really wasn't talking a whole lot, but just listening. And he said, he made the statement, he told these other guys, he said, listen, he said, this is a good example of 51% of the American people being functioning illiterate, because you guys hear a comment or a statement is told to you and you don't even know how to go and check out that information and how to research that information. And they looked at him and they're like, what are you talking about? Everybody should be very aware of things. We should be very smart today because, everybody's got a phone or a device they can look up things on. And he said, that's absolutely true. He says, and people should be. He said, but you didn't listen to the statement that Brian made. He said, Brian said 51% of Americans are functioning illiterate. And they're like, yeah. Well, for some reason, that word functioning went in one ear and right out the other. The only word they heard was illiterate. That's the only word they heard. So what did they go start researching? They're going and starting to research how many people are illiterate in America, or what state has the most amount of illiterate people in it, when the key word is functioning illiterate, which would be somebody that is able to read, but at an extremely low grade level. And that's one of the reasons why 51% of the people wouldn't even begin to comprehend modern money mechanics. That's probably why they went ahead and released it. I don't care. Let the plebes read it. Let the peasants read it. It's not going to mean anything to them. And the average man or woman probably would have no interest in even looking at it to start with, even though it holds a ton of little secrets in it. I notice we got a couple hands up, and I see Heather has her hand up. So, Heather, if you want to comment on something, feel free. I just unmuted you on this end. You just have to unmute yourself on your end. Well, I guess.
I figured it out. Sorry.
You got it. There you go. I know.
Okay.
Technology is so awesome nowadays, isn't it?
It makes you feel you're talking about illiteracy or whatever. That I feel very much in that 51% right now. I've been trying to figure out how to maneuver in here because somebody asked about a book that you had mentioned earlier. And I wanted to get on that. I couldn't figure out how to do that either, but ask a question. But anyhow, there's so many different people. I've been at this now, like really trying to learn everything that I can. and it's very overwhelming. But for about 4 years now, and everybody has a different approach to how they do all this, right? I guess publicly, like in our little I don't know. I'm at a loss for words. You know what I mean? People like yourself who have thought, like people who learn under you. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
I don't have anybody to talk to about this in my community. It's groups like this that I have to communicate with, but everybody has a different approach to doing it, and it seems like somehow this group will say, "Oh, you're doing it wrong. It has to be done this way," and I'm thinking that the fundamental start of it is just getting your name corrected. Is that right? Getting your status corrected as far as now I'm going to be no longer the straw man. I've got I'm going to be myself. I'm going to be the living woman, and I'm going to your approach is to say, okay, I'm going to manage my estate. That's my straw man, right? Is that what you're saying? Managing my estate is my straw man, right?
Right. Yeah. I would say probably one of the main things that you want to tackle is that relationship that you have with that name that you've been using all your life and your identity with it. I think the biggest thing for some people to comprehend, like for you, is that guess what, Heather? You are not Heather.
Right.
You're a living woman.
I get. I mean, it's kind of like when you learn about this, it's kind of like being reborn all over again to learn the truth of nothing. Nothing is what it seems. But everybody, this group will say, don't go rushing into it. You need to know you really find yourself in a whole lot of trouble if you start saying, oh, I want to dismiss this debt and I want to no, I'm going to turn over my driver's license and no longer get registration. You have to really know what you're talking about, but I don't feel like you really can just really know what you're talking about without taking your first step. And I'm thinking that's where you got to start, right? The birth certificate. You got to get right.
Yeah. Yeah. Probably a birth certificate was the one thing that I've researched the most on. One of the things I did as well, and like you're talking when you first start learning and looking at things, the first thing I decided was that there's so many of these different things happening. A lot of people are harping on the driver's license issue. There's people discussing tax issue, patriot issues. I mean, there's just so much stuff out there that I decided, you know what? What I'm going to do is I'm going to pick one item at a time, and I am going to study it and research it to the fullest capability I can to come up with how that situation is set up, and then I'll move on to the next issue and just do one thing at a time. And that meant turning off the TV, turning off the radio, and going back to school, because I figured that guess what? Evidently, the first however many years, 12, 13 years that you spend of your life in school didn't teach you what you're really supposed to know. Teaches you what you need to know to be a worker, but it doesn't really teach you what you're supposed to know. So I said, time for me to go back to school.
Yeah, I agree with you. And that's the part that gets so overwhelming. And then you're sitting here and you learn things that are so profound for the first time ever, and it gets exciting, but you don't have anybody to talk to about it. And if you do talk to someone about it, they look at you as if you're crazy, and you're absolutely right. There's no chance in hell they're going to look at or read anything that you would maybe like point them in the direction. You literally have to take them to school, and that's impossible because you're in school,
Right.
It's a little intimidating also because you have to be quite assertive in these, like, seems like with the clerk's office and with these different agencies and stuff. And so I do understand when people say you really need to know what you're talking about before you start putting this into action. I don't know if you really find yourself in trouble. I'm assuming if you were kind of a hothead and trying to beat a ticket or something like that, or maybe you were already underwater, as far as maybe you.
Well, Heather, I'll tell you what, Heather, the situation I was in was I would say, unique to maybe the truth movement or whatever you want to call it, because most people that are into this stuff, they're in it because they're knee deep in child support, or they're facing jail time, or they've got major pending things facing them, which is bad. It's a bad situation to be in because that means you've got blinders on. And you're only going to be looking for things that pertain exactly to your exact situation. And guess what? You're not probably going to find much. And so I didn't have any of those. So I was able to go into this eyes wide open, to borrow that freaking title, eyes wide open, and go step by step and look at each of the different topics that different people were discussing and try and get it ironed out the best I could before I moved on to something else. So yeah, fortunately it was a little easier because of that.
Okay. Yeah, I've heard you say that before, and I've seen a lot of people. I think those are the ones that give a lot of advice on don't, this is the way you got to do it. If you don't go do it this way, you'll find yourself in jail. And I'm thinking, well, you are the one that came into this with dirty hands to begin with, so that I could see that. Um, in the same token, I guess you just got to start somewhere. So, and we've been so conditioned to keep our mouth shut and go along with it. So it's kind of unusual for me to be by myself, talking to these people and trying to do it the right way. But you got to start somewhere, whether you look stupid or not, right?
Right. I
I'll
mean,
figure it out along the way.
you don't want to just jump in and you hear about UCC. That's one of the first things you're going to hear. So okay, I'll fill out UCC.
Yeah, I hear that a lot, and I'm not knowledgeable enough to be able to speak on that just yet. Like you said, I have to go very slow. And 4 years into it, it's pretty slow.
Well, it's all how much time you have to dedicate to it, because I'll tell you what, first 4 years, I gained a whole bunch of knowledge that first 4 years. But the thing is, people have to realize there's no law against being stupid. Just because you fill out some form and you didn't know what you're doing, they don't care. You're supposed to know. In fact, according to them, by even filling out that form, you're claiming to know everything there is to know about it. And so that's very challenging. I mean, even say, for instance, in the Internal Revenue Code, one time I found a statement in there that people that handle Federal Reserve notes, buying and selling with Federal Reserve notes, are assumed to be banking experts. So you get yourself in trouble with different things that you do with the coin of the realm. Well, guess what? They don't care. Like I said, there's no law against being stupid.
Well, can I ask a question about that? When we're talking about the trusts, I've heard it said a few times that if you actually got your hands on your trust, like actual money, that you would be committing a crime yourself, that you can use it as like a credit, like they use it as a credit, like, do you know anything about this? You can actually not access the physical money. Is that something that somebody's speaking out of turn on, or no?
Well, right. The first thing, okay, is that too many people have the assumption or presumption that there is a individual trust out there for each and every man and woman. To a degree, they're right, but not to the degree that they think they are. Now, this goes back to people like chasing secret treasury accounts, and accessing their treasury account trust and all that kind of stuff. There is the public pool that's out there, but the closest thing, the only thing you really find regarding an individual trust account would be a Social Security account. That's all there is.
Okay, I've heard that before, that it's not what it seems, and that's fine, because is somebody else jumping in, because I don't want to be manipulating.
What's that, Joe?
50. I'm sorry, but you're good. Do you think?
Oh, okay.
All right.
But and because you can still dismiss your debt, right? I mean, as you get through this process, correct?
Right.
I took a class. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just agreeing with you. Go ahead.
I took a class from Trial here couple years ago, and I've listened to some of your like older podcasts with her, and I know that's something that she had taught in the class about. Absolutely, you can dismiss all of your debt. She gets more into it than I'm familiar with. Like I wouldn't. I'm not that advanced as she is. Obviously, that would be above my head. The things that she speaks on that she's capable of doing so far, but that's you know, correct. Like you have dismissed all of your debt, correct?
Yeah, that's that I had incurred. Yeah, but I think the best advice that I could give to anybody, yeah, take care of whatever things that are on the books now, and there's even several different ways out there to take the things that are on the books and keep them pretty much hidden from everybody else, which I think would be step one. But the best advice is don't incur any new debt, because a debt is also nothing but a liability to you as well, and it's created to gain interest. And the bankers have said, even regarding the U.S. debt, they don't care if it ever gets paid off. In fact, they prefer it never get paid off. All they want is just the regular interest checks coming in on the debt.
Right.
So, yeah, don't incur any new debt. Oh, no, man, not anything. Gosh, where did we read that at?
Right. Thank you very much for speaking on all of this. I've listened to some of your videos for a long time, and you've been one of my good teachers so far. So I appreciate you very much.
Oh, well, it's good to hear. And so many times I wonder, hey, I'm satisfied where I'm at now. That doesn't mean that there's not other things I'm working on, but I was like, is there a reason I keep doing this? I mean, and that's the reason why we started up these calls on Talkshoe, was so that group members could come on and talk about different ideas and things like that and hash them out, rather than it being just in an individual thread in a closed group where it's being discussed. It'd be best to do it here. That way, other people could join in and listen, and maybe listen tomorrow, or even explore the topic a year from now or 2 years from now.
It's coming that way too, by the way. Have you noticed an increase?
Yeah, definitely. And I've had people chime in before that I didn't know their name. I didn't know them from Adam, but they said, "Oh, you've got to do this and this and this." And I'm like, "Whoa, where'd you hear that at?" They're like, "This is something you posted about 3 years ago." And I'm like, "Really? I didn't even know you were around." But yeah, they were just one of these people that were looking at posts and maybe listening to calls and just sitting back doing their own study and their own learning, which I think there's probably more people out there like that than we realize, which is great. It's excellent.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Don't stop now. You're gaining momentum. More and more people are, waking up and learning about who they are and stuff. So it's really important.
Yeah, absolutely.
I started the movement. I started understanding this stuff because, like you said, a lot of people got into this because of child support or family law, or they were in trouble with speeding tickets or other things. And that's where my journey began. I've been blessed so far to go to jail very few times and come out of most situations more or less unscathed, minus the emotional issues.
Well, you know what, jail, for instance, yeah, a lot of people push that you should claim the position of being a beneficiary, right? And, beneficiary is a position in a trust. Well, guess what the system looks at jail as? They look at as jail as a benefit. So,
Money making.
right,
Is that because you don't have to pay any debt while you're in jail and they feed you, even if it is subpar food?
Well, here's one of the deals. Is when we think of the position of beneficiary, or we hear the term benefit, we think, okay, how am I gaining from this? Well, guess what? Benefits and the position of those benefits for a beneficiary go both ways, not just for you, but also for maybe the grantor of the trust or its trustees, because they may be receiving a benefit in you not being on the street. Or they may be receiving a benefit from bonds or things that were written regarding your case. So that's one of the ways they see it as a benefit. You as the beneficiary can supply benefits back to the trust. That's what trusts are all about. And they're about separating you, the true party of interest, from that property. That's the number one thing that's not talked about with trust. Because whoever set up the trust wants to protect the trust from whoever they name as a beneficiary. I've got a 304 number here that has had a phone up for a while. Oh, Heather, do you want to mention something?
Oh, I just wanted to. Would it be okay to share the top secret bankers manual in the chat?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I've shared it in the group as well. And yeah, throw it in the chat. And if people are listening to this just on Talkshoe, on the Talkshoe link, well, if you're listening to this on YouTube, you can go to the Talkshoe link, which is Tactical Sovereignty 143321. 143321. You can use the Great Oracle, Google, Bing, whoever your Great Oracle is, to access these calls. And you can go to this one, and you can go and you can pull up the chat. You can go and pull up a transcript from tonight or other calls. So that way, if people are listening to this on some other platform, they'll know how to come back and find that if you toss it in the chat. And that's been put into, I think it's in the current Tactical Sovereignty on Facebook as well. Anyway, I was going to mention 304's had their hand up for a while, so I was just going to let them chime in. 304, if there's something you want to bring up, feel free to do so. I will unmute you. Hey, what's going on, bro? How you doing?
Yeah, this is Ken. I'm doing okay. I wanted to ask you a question, possibly make a comment. You were mentioning and talking about trusts and both the split title, equitable, and legal title, but you mentioned in particular family trusts and other trusts. Would you say that the same applies across the board, even for common law trusts and charitable religious trusts?
Yeah, common law trust. Well, common law trust brings up a term that causes a lot of fights amongst people because people don't really comprehend it. It was one of the first things that I was noticing all the time, that I was like, okay, I got to wrap my head around what this is, and that's that word common law. And a lot of the gurus out there, most of them that I've heard talk about trust, will also refer to a common law trust as a Massachusetts trust. Have you heard that mentioned, Ken?
Yes, I have.
But when I go in,
I'm not sure there's universal agreement on it that it is a Massachusetts trust, though. So.
Right. Well, when I go in and study trust, and if I'm wrong, somebody let me know. But everything I've found, like regarding Massachusetts trust, it's also termed as a business trust. And one of the things that a lot of people think about trust is that trust will keep your property and your affairs out of the hands of the state or out of the hands of the judicial system, right? Well, if you have a problem with something a trustee is doing, if you're a beneficiary of a trust and you think a trustee might be pilfering the trust or withholding information or things like that, there's only one way to rectify that. Do you know what that is, Ken?
Well, I guess you would say you have to use the system to bring a case against that party in order to rectify it if they won't voluntarily talk to you and rectify it.
Right. Yep. The only way to make any adjustment to a trust, if you can't get an agreement among the parties to do so, The only way to do it is through the state and through the judicial system. The judicial system has a higher authority on that trust than even you do as a trustee or beneficiary. So, is it hiding or protecting property or anything like that from the state or the judicial system? Absolutely not.
Okay, that's in the common law trust. Now, how about on the charitable religious trust?
That's on any trust. There is a whole bunch of various types of trusts that are out there. Um,
Mhm.
but they're all essentially they're structured the same way, and they fall under the same rules. It doesn't matter if you want to call it a common law trust or if it's a living beneficial trust for somebody or an education trust, college trust, whatever the case may be. Same rules apply to them across the board.
Okay. Thank you for your comments. I appreciate it.
You got it, Ken. So, yeah, one of the things that I encounter a lot of times because I'm constantly speaking to people one-on-one, like consults, that kind of stuff. And normally those conversations go like this. They normally occur 3 different times. And the first time is me listening for about an hour and a half or more about everything that man or woman has learned or thought they learned. That isn't necessarily so. And the second conversation is going back over those things and explain to them why those things that they thought they've learned aren't necessarily so. And that's one of the things that Mark Twain had said was that, it's not what people know that gets them into trouble. It's what they think they know that just isn't so. That's the things that really get you in trouble. And there's tons of people out there that are out there doing seminars and stuff, teaching a lot of things that they think they know that just aren't so. And so normally at the end of maybe my second conversation with a lot of people, they'll stop and be like, you know what, you've just blown out of the water everything that I thought I knew about secretly about how things are being run, and because when it really comes down to it, a lot of this stuff is so simple and so basic and easy, and it's not as fun as signing your name in red at a 45-degree angle or going and finding a red fox stamp and putting on the back left corner at the bottom of a document, or standing on your left foot while you throw salt over your right shoulder. I mean, yeah, or writing to the postmaster general. Yeah, sorry, a lot of these things aren't all of that what people think of as fun stuff or whatever. It's just more simple and basic than that. So,
but it doesn't seem like it can be. It doesn't seem like it should be that easy. So, like, I know what you're talking about, signing in the red ink. I'm looking at a 65-page printout that I printed out probably 3 months ago from another group, which reads very, very well. Your approach seems so much easier, and it doesn't seem like that can't be right. It can't be this simple.
right.
Not that it is. It's not simple. There's so much to it. Like the way 304 and you were just speaking with ease, using the language you're using. That seems really simple too, but if I'm observing or sitting back quietly listening to you, I follow along, but I can't talk like you guys talk. I don't have that language. Does that make sense?
Oh, that makes total sense. And I'll tell you what, that's what I even kind of thought about not even doing a call tonight because I didn't really have a topic to go on. It's normally best if I just write down half a page of items to go over, because so much of this stuff has just kind of become second nature to me that none of it's anything that I think would sound amazing or anything to anybody. But though I know a lot of people out there don't are in that position, like you said, of talking at ease, regarding the language or the verbiage that's used. And as a matter of fact, that's one of the reasons why there's a lot of language and verbiage that's put out there for people that they go and they use on their documents that they really don't know a whole lot about, but they think, oh, this is some of that language, and if I use this, then this will make it seem like I know what I'm saying. I think a very good example of that would be a lot of people will start out a document with the statement that notice to agent is notice to principal, notice to principal is notice to agent, that kind of verbiage. But I'm sorry, but the individual or the firm or whoever agency, whatever it may be that you're writing to, that's like telling them that the sky is blue. It's like, why are they saying this to me? You know, I was talking to a retired attorney a while ago, and I was just joking with him. I said, hey, I'm reading a book right now that you probably haven't seen since college. And he said, what's that? And I told him, it's a treatise on contract and tort, and law of agency. And he's like, oh my God. He's like, I haven't even thought about that book in 50 years, And he looked at me and said, nobody in their right mind would read that for entertainment, you know. And I said, yeah, you're right. Well, I said, but to me, an education is entertaining as well. And, I asked him if he wanted to borrow it, and he said, for what? A doorstop? Because it's a decent sized book. But the thing is, a lot of the concepts, well, all of the concepts and everything within that book are things that these people were schooled on their first year or two of university, however many years ago. You know what I mean? So telling them that notice to agent is notice to principal is notice to agent, they look at you like, are you okay? What's wrong with you? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's not something that makes you look smarter. It makes you look more like you're somebody just copying, pasting things from online sources of the crazy guru guano stuff that's out there. So
I
anyway,
like hearing that because I don't like when anybody talks that way. I'm a nurse, and sometimes other nurses will talk strictly in just to make themselves feel better, with the patients, strictly in medical terminology. And I'm like, I don't want to talk like that. I know exactly what you're saying, but you sound like an idiot. Like, what we're all supposed to be talking to each other like people. You're trying to teach your patient something, but you're talking to them like they're dumb and you look dumb. So I'm like I said, this 65-page document that I'm looking at, it is kind of worded that way, and it seems very formal. And it's it, this group is saying that it's very important that you follow this procedure, that it has to be this formal, and that's fine. I want to do it right, but I do think it's nice to talk in simple terms too. Like just to people, and to clarify that aren't we all supposed to be just human beings and not actually like trust or dead,
right.
pieces of paper that are,
Well,
bang.
everything that's been put out regarding, say, legal things or stuff like that, which, granted, there's a lot of legalese terms that are used that people won't know what it really means. They know what it means in common use, but they don't know what it means in legal use. There's a lot of things like that. But
Yeah.
overall, things are really, the system in general is supposed to be set up so that the common man could comprehend it. So that the man of average intelligence or whatever should be able to follow along. So when people are going throwing things out really super, it sounds kind of complicated, right? Yeah, you might want to stay away from it. I'll say this as well. Anything that I have ever written or done regarding the relationship with the state, with some people call it straw man. I don't use that term because that term right there says, oh, you're an expert on internet guru guano when they see the term straw man. But anything I've ever written or whatever to any of these people has always been a one-page document. Now, it might have an exhibit that goes with it. If I may have, like on my declaration, there's 4 or 5 statements that I make on there that I back up with other one-page exhibits.
Really, I didn't know that. That's great.
Yeah. And I've never seen anything that you can't really just do with one page to take care
That,
of.
well, nobody wants to read 65 pages. They want to read a paragraph or a page. So I
Right.
didn't. That's how you made your declaration. So that's good to know.
Right. There's somebody years ago that was peddling a 57-page document. And so when somebody would contact me and say, well, I got this 57-page document, I knew exactly what they're talking about, where they gotten it from, you know what I mean? But the thing is, like you said, nobody's going to sit and read 57 pages, but they'll look at one page. Anyway, was that you, Ken? Did you have something?
Brian, yeah, I wanted to ask Heather a question. Is that 65-page document that she's talking about, by any chance, the document that comes out of the union call out of the state of Massachusetts?
No, it's not, and I'm not trying to speak disparagingly on this group because like I said, there's a lot of different people that are going about this in a different way, and it seems to be the ones that well, I mean, the ones that I keep up with are they're not. I don't think they're trying to speak over people's heads because they're just trying to put on airs. I think that this is just the way that they've gone about doing it, and it's worked for them, and that's fine. So I'm not, they're good people and they've offered to help in different ways. It's just it seems a lot. It seems like a lot of stuff. No, this is a good group of people. I think that American Assembly, or they seem to be a good group of people. Do you know what I'm talking about? The American Assembly.
Well, I've heard of different assemblies. Some of them I don't think are necessarily on the right track, but that doesn't mean that their
I've seen that too.
documents to be.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean necessarily that their documents are not on the right track as far as the man or woman filing a document. I just don't agree with some of the ways they're trying to, let's say, restore the republic.
Oh, okay. I have seen some infighting.
Well, I don't know.
And it's beyond my, like I said, I'm still a newborn here, so I have some of the things that they are saying. Don't go with this group, or don't go with that group. Or don't do it this way. Don't do it that. It's kind of a red flag to me, anyhow. You know what I'm saying? But by and large, the people that I've kind of learned from, they seem to be, good people, just have different approaches, but some of these are very detailed and very lengthy and a little overwhelming.
Well, there's thousands of people working on this, and they all have their own approach.
Yeah, but if you're a newcomer, you take all the advice you can get, right? You have to sift through it, right?
Well, yeah, you better sort it out though before you act on it.
Heck yeah.
Thank you for your comments, Heather. Brian, I wanted to add one more thing. When I asked about the charitable religious trust, I'm familiar with a gentleman out of Panama who works with another gentleman in Florida, and they not only pair those charitable religious trusts with Corporation Soul, but if you're wanting to do any other financial activities overseas or out of the country, offshore, they would also do this with a private interest foundation. Now, they make it quite clear that this is not a subversive way to hide your assets or do anything like that, that you should also make sure you do all the prerequisites, however you might do that. They have their own method, but other people operate differently. Your own prerequisites to separate yourself as a man or woman from the system. They happen to do it for the most part, from what I understand, through the State Department, with a little bit of differences here and there, and the State Department also including an application for a passport and a passport card. They seem to have a good track record for a number of years with people doing this. And so they claim that is separate and apart from what they're doing in having one protect their assets. So I just wanted to make it clear, because I wasn't sure when you came back and said, yeah, but all trusts are the same, I wanted to make it clear why they were doing this. They also claim, one of the individuals there that sets this up also claims, and I'm not sure that every last person in the group agrees with him necessarily, but he claims that you also ought to go back and do rescission of signatures, revocation of power of attorneys, power of appointment, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a more, when they're pairing these charitable religious trusts, although they might stand on their own, they're pairing them with other entities, and they're clearly separating that from the man or woman. So I just wanted to make that clear so that I didn't leave anybody with any misapprehension of what I was saying. If you had any comments on that, I'd appreciate hearing them.
Yeah, no, thanks, Ken. I appreciate that. And I know who you're talking about down there as well. And he's a decent man. But this goes back to what I was saying about trust. Yes, they're all the same, they're structured the same. But like I said, there's different names for them because there's different purposes behind different trusts. There's trusts that are, like I said, some are maybe an education trust. There's also medical trusts, so there are different purposes for different trusts, and you can use them for different things. I just think that people need to be very aware of the structure and how it's all put together and what it can do and maybe what it necessarily can't do as compared to what a lot of people have been taught. Heather talked about, and you brought up different assembly groups or whatever. And without knowing that one specific assembly, I couldn't really make a statement. But I think there's a benefit really to, say, for instance, these assembly groups. And it's a benefit because you're going to meet other like-minded people. There's other people you can talk with and that kind of thing. But don't fall in the trap of taking on what this assembly is pushing or teaching as being the gospel truth. Everything that is told to you, even things that seem very small or basic, write them down and then go back and do your own homework and do your own research on them later. Because you'll start finding out where there's a lot of holes at. And a lot of people that I've known that, in fact, pretty much everybody that I've known who has joined with different groups like these, did it when they first came on, and it was good for them to get to meet other people. No, they weren't alone in this whole situation. But though they didn't sit back, these people, that they didn't just sit back and stick with the assembly like this is my new God now. They double checked everything that was being pushed, and within time they separated themselves from those assemblies because they quickly found they find that the people that are at the heart of the assembly, the leader or whoever, they're doing this. Maybe there's a narcissistic need, I don't know, but these are also people though that haven't gone and kept researching and kept studying. They just, they were attracted to this one shiny object all their life. Then they found out that that was all BS, and then they find a new shiny object. So now this becomes their new God, and they don't question it either. And that's a danger.
Right.
Well, I think that during the learning process, when you're going to listen to these people, and we'll just use an assembly as one hypothetical example, you need to listen to them for a while, and very often, with a discerning ear, you'll pick up conflicts within their own talk and their own presentation, and it's not necessarily because they learned what they were saying last week was not true. It's because they really don't have the sufficient knowledge to present the subject, and they don't have a track record on it. So you can discover this on your own if you listen to them very carefully in what they're saying, and you go research it.
Right. One of the things I find frustrating, and this goes back to the story I told about telling a group of guys that 51% of Americans are functioning illiterate, and they only heard the word illiterate. You know what I mean? There's a gentleman out there that is reasonably popular. A lot of people love listening to his stuff and everything. It's ear tickling or whatever. But in one of his videos, he comes right out and he tells you he's military psyop. He comes right out and tells you right in the beginning. But
Wow.
people continue listening to everything, and I know that one main video he did, I sat down and I just started writing down things he was saying. And I could pretty much go sentence by sentence and paragraph by paragraph and disprove everything he was saying. But it was ear tickling things for people who have never researched, never studied, don't know civics. It all sounds really freaking good, because it's something they don't know anything about. So they have no way of knowing whether it's right or wrong.
Right.
Well, really need to have a passion for this. This has to be in your blood. It comes across when you make presentations, and when you really believe in what you're doing, even if you make small slip up, you can get over that. When you're just doing this because you want to get out of paying taxes, or you want to get out of a traffic ticket, or you don't want to pay property taxes, whatever the situation is, you really don't come across most of the time as being knowledgeable and genuine. It's got to be you. That's at least my experience, and I've observed that that's really what works best, although most people do not want to put the time and effort in that is required to learn all of this. So they get the requisite results of whatever time they spent or didn't spend doing what they did.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of times people will get the record result for, one little issue that they might have, and you show them how simple it is to take care of, and they take care of it. And then what happens? They disappear. Now, it got taken care of, because if it didn't get taken care of, they'd be bitching at you constantly until it did. But they get it taken care of and they disappear, and you never hear anything back from them again. And it's like, wait a minute. You're finding evidence of stuff that works. You should be learning more and more about it and trying to help other people. But unfortunately, that just doesn't occur.
I think that for
Not most
myself.
of the time.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. For myself,
No, that's
this
it. Go
just
ahead.
learning this, beginning to learn this 4 years ago. Um, I'm 45 years old, so I was 41 when I first began learning the truth about the reality that I'm living in. I don't think you should stop learning about it until you're done with this place. You know what I'm saying? We've been taught our whole lives everything upside down, so it's time to you should definitely be passionate. I have been passionate. It's just so much information to take in. And at the same time, there's a lot of other things that I think a lot of people, including myself, have become aware of at the same time as all the legal stuff like this and who we are. But like a lot of the crimes that have been committed to, it's all at once. You know what I'm saying? Like the serious crimes that have been, so it's overwhelming. It's quite a bit of information to take in. Like I said, it's almost like you're reborn.
Well, you certainly have your hands full with the medical industry. That's for sure.
I've stepped away from that.
I've got, I think one of a big piece of advice I could give people, especially, people that are new, and maybe even people who have been in this for 10, 15, 20 years. I mean, when I first started researching and looking at things, I was trying to find other people, not just the freaking online gurus, but find real honest people who had been studying these things for years and looking at what they had found, because they would be, a few steps ahead of you. And one of the biggest first traps most people will fall into, and you're pretty much born into it, waving flags on 4th of July, is the whole patriot movement. And I looked at a lot of the patriot info out there and looked at, the people that had been fighting these battles, and you're not meant to fight. You should abjure the realm, leave in peace. That's the only way that works. But I looked at a lot of these patriot movements and stuff, and people have been fighting court battles and fighting the system, up until their dying breath, till they're in their 80s or 90s. And I thought, that is not the way I want to live my life. I don't want to spend the rest of my life fighting the beast, because it's a daunting, impossible task. I said, I just need to look at the basics and see what makes sense, see what's simple, and take care of it. But some people enjoy the fight. They want to be in the fight. They live for the fight. Not me. That's not the way I want to spend the rest of my life. And so, I try not to bring up specific names of different people or things like that, but hopefully I give you enough clue that if you know any of these people, then I've given you several hints as to maybe who they are. Because I don't think there's anything beneficial or advantageous to singling out people and harping on them and calling people out and that kind of stuff. I don't see that as really being a benefit. It's more divisive than anything. But to stay away from new shiny objects. It's like on this video right now, my backdrop is the eye of who?
Horus, right?
No, no,
Or
actually,
isn't it?
it's
Go ahead.
the Horus. The eye of Horus is the left eye.
Oh,
The right eye is the eye of Ra.
see the minutia. I
See,
didn't
yeah,
know.
right. There's a nuance there, and a lot of people they'll stumble across like the all-seeing eye, and they don't go any further. You went further. You at least know about the eye of Horus. You know what I mean? And so then every time they see that, it's a trigger for them. Oh my God, Brian's got the all-seeing eye behind him. He must be part of the Illuminati or something. You know what I mean? And so people run with those crazy things. I call that the silly string in the truth movement. And that silly string you can get all tangled up in, and you'll get nowhere because you're tangled up in silly string. You're out looking for the number 33 everywhere you can find it. Oh, that's a 33. In fact, I had a video a while ago that was 33 minutes and 33 seconds long. And when I noticed that when the recording was done, I thought, oh gosh, that's going to trigger a bunch of people. But
Yep.
you can use different things like that. If you really want to understand those kind of things, you can go a deeper level in and start studying steganography and comprehend what the X steganography is all about. Because, yeah, some of these things are out there and they do matter and it's good to know, but, there's not a 33 behind every bush. Sorry.
No, and you can go down a rabbit's hole with that. For me, this whole, all of this that I've, been learning about is not about. I know what you're saying. People enjoy fighting. I see it in every group, but whether it's nursing or whether it's, I'm a survivor of many things. I used to publicly speak about that. But for me, what I think is, I take it a different approach. I think it's very exciting. It's empowering. Like little by little, you're not held down anymore. The more you're learning about it, you're freeing yourself of, this system that I've been living in has been designed to keep you in a place of fear. And this whole situation, learning all of this is, once you get it down and are able to communicate it the way you are and you guys are, that's pretty exciting. You're free, you can do what you need to do and not be controlled. And if we could all get together and do that, that would be pretty phenomenal. And that's not ever going to happen, but it's a nice idea. So I know what you mean. I think people enjoy fighting.
Right. Well, there's a lot of people that enjoy the fight, but, and regarding like the silly string I'm talking about, people need to realize that these stumbling blocks, these little rabbit holes are placed out there on purpose. And sometimes they're not even on purpose. It's the useful idiots that are in our community that go and grab these things and get everybody else sidetracked on them as well. And I think one important thing for people to keep in the back of their mind, and write this down like in your notebook, put it at the top page, at the top of the first page of your notebook, write down actionable information. Write down those two words. Because I don't care if this public official has been swapped out with a clone, you know what I mean? Or if this person's related to that person, or where all the 33s or where all the all-seeing eyes or all the obelisks are at and stuff like that. That's all silly string. that's going to keep you tangled up. And it might be fun, it might be interesting, but guess what? It's not actionable information.
Yeah.
What are you going to do with it? Number one, how are you going to prove it? Number two, does it really affect you? You know, three, how can you use that as actionable information to help you on your journey? Because the majority of the stuff out there, it's not actionable information. All it does is it preoccupies your mind.
Right. It's hard to get there initially. I must say, because if you're not awake and you're not aware of any of this stuff, you find yourself entangled in these, um, in this game that they play, the courts and the way that they play it against the people, and it's, you know what I mean. So, yeah. So initially waking up, you feel like this urge to discover and learn all of that stuff, and there's a lot of truth in, certain all of these dark sides to our, behind all of this too. There's all that's true, but it's not going. It's like you said, it's not going to do any good to just keep chasing down that way. I'm all, we need to be on resolve and stop dividing, and it's all just silly string, like you said, and it's any kind of silly string they can come up with at any given time just to stay distracted. And I know what you mean about it not being necessarily intended initially, but people get so excited about being front and center that it might as well be intentional. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it just
We could be our own worst enemy.
uh-huh.
Yeah.
And then you've got a following now that's going along with some type of crazy talking way off topic, like actually getting something done or doing something for, you know what I mean? So, yeah. Oh, I started off initially listening to Glenn Winningham. I'm assuming you know who he is?
Yeah.
Do you know who? Okay. I think he's a pretty smart guy. Right? I like him a whole lot. I don't know him, but he's got a lot of smart things to say.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Glenn, you said Glenn Winningham, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I listened to him. God, it's been a long time now. But yeah, there's a lot of good people out there like that. Rob Ryder on YouTube, he's good. I like Rob Ryder because you can follow along with him while he's actually researching things online and kind of see how he follows stuff. You know what I mean? And that's always good to see how somebody is researching something. That's the good information for people, help them on their journey.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I think, really what you were just talking about there, Heather, is actually a good segue for closing out tonight. Because I tell people every week, I try and remind everybody, if you really want to know where to start, you need to learn who you really are, where you're really from, and where you're really at. Because those have been the three big deception traps placed in front of everybody. You learn those things, and you're going to be leaps and bounds ahead of Joe Sixpack.
Yep.
Or that black robe freaking cross dresser at your temple downtown at the county courthouse. So
Right. Boy, that.
all right, everybody.
Thank you so much, very much.
Thanks, Heather. All right, everybody. Thank you, guys, and look forward to talking to you all, chatting with you next Sunday. If anybody has any particular topic they want covered or something, feel free to throw it in the comments. Let me know, and we'll tackle it for you. So until next week, everybody have a wonderful, wonderful life and enjoy this life. That's what you're supposed to be doing. You're supposed to be enjoying it and learning and not fighting, not battling. Don't battle against something that you'll never win against. You got to know your enemy. Good night.